Hello, welcome to Teaching Artistry with Courtney J. Boddie. That's me. This is a podcast that celebrates artists and advocates for community engagement. And this is We Can't Go Back, a video series in partnership with Creative Generation meant to examine, interrogate, and confront racist policies and systems in the arts. This series amplifies leaders in arts and culture who drive radical change in communities through anti-racist and liberatory practices. Subscribe to the Teaching Artistry with Courtney J. Boddie YouTube channel and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. I identify as a Black cisgendered woman, and I am uplifting and paying respect to my ancestors from across the African diaspora, stolen from their native lands and within the US. Today, I am specifically thinking about my maternal grandfather, James Augustus Cornelius Fields. He was in the US Army during World War I and migrated during the Great Migration from Alabama to Chicago to work as a postman on the south side of Chicago and provided for his 7 children, one of which was my mother. I have the privilege to live and work on the stolen lands of the Munsee, Lenape, and Canarsie nations in Brooklyn, New York, for which I am very grateful for. And I pay respect and uplift the Indigenous diaspora, also woven into my history and DNA through a network of love and solidarity. So let's welcome our panelists, our guests for this evening, Carin Ford and Lisa Dawn Cave. Hello, everyone.
Hi, Courtney.
Hey, Courtney.
Hello and welcome, and thank you so much for joining me. And let's just get right into it. We'd love to hear about your role in the theater industry or in general. And why don't we start with Carin?
Yeah, my role in theater is I'm a sound engineer. I am called a front of house mixer, or I sit in the house in the orchestra section mixing shows. And the majority of the shows that I have done, in fact, 99% of them have been musicals. So that's what I do. I'm a front of house sound engineer. Don't usually work backstage. Usually I'm out front.
And I am a stage manager. So I work backstage. Currently, I'm in Sydney, Australia right now. I'm the production supervisor for Disney's Frozen. And we're putting that show up here in Australia, where theater actually is slowly coming back. And I looked up here in Australia and said, okay, what land am I, sitting on here? Because I don't think this land all of a sudden became the Australians. And of course, I'm sitting on the Eura people's land here in Australia, just to say that. My position is basically, connecting all the departments. That's what stage managers do. We're like the center, and we connect the designers and the creatives and the technicians, the producers, the general managers. So we're like the people that were in the center, and everybody comes to, and we funnel all the information out and then connect all the information together. So even though Carin doesn't work physically behind the stage, she's one of also the people that are the backbone of the theater that you don't see on the stage in front of the audience. That's who I am also.
The way that I have connected with you both is through a colleague of mine, W.T. McRae, where we were talking about this podcast and this video series specifically. And then they connected me with Carin, and I learned more about Black Theater United. So I was hoping that you could share with us more about that institution or that organization, Black Theater United, how it got started, what's its mission, and how each of you are involved.
The origins actually of Black Theater United were started by Audra McDonald and LaShawn's basically getting together and having a conversation. That conversation, from what I hear, formed and started from the murder of George Floyd, where when that happened, they said the theater community is silent. We don't hear anything from them about this. What is going on? We have to do something. We have to say to them, why are you being silent? So those 2 beautiful women got together and said, let's call some folks that we know. So they basically made phone calls to all of us and said, we need to all get in a room and have a discussion about what we can do to open up the eyes and the ears and, to what's going on, because this is theater. We love theater, and we can't stand by and let them be silent about this, So that's how it started. That's how we all got phone calls and then got into a room and just started a conversation about what did we want to be? What do we want to represent? Who do we want to be as an organization? And yes, all of us are from theater, but we also said, in order to make theater aware, we have to also go outside of theater, because what actually, I don't like to use the word control, but what affects theater comes from the outside too. So a lot of our initiatives, was the census and making sure everyone understood why it was so important. It's not something that comes around every 10 years and you just throw a piece of paper away. It actually means something as simple as if you have a grocery store in your neighborhood or not, and we had to, it's education basically, and it's, let's get away from the fear tactic also of those that were afraid to fill it out because they thought they, were going to be sought out for whatever reason. And then also the voting initiative, how important that is. And it wasn't that we were telling people who to vote for. We were just saying, exercise your right to vote, especially since our ancestors basically were beaten and were lynched, for that right. So don't just squander it and throw it away. So we had initiatives with that. So it wasn't just theater. We had to do those things to enlighten, because there were a lot of theater people that didn't know about the census and weren't going to fill it out and didn't know the importance of voting, and the importance of not just voting for the president who sits in that seat, but the voting for who your community, who's on the board of your school, who's your councilwoman that, runs your community that you're in. So those are some of the things that we wanted to start with.
I was brought in a little bit later. One of the founding members gave me a call and said, "Hey, you want to join us in this? You'll be the one, stagehand that represents among 19 actors and one stage manager." I said, "Absolutely." And what was great is that I've worked with about 90% of everybody that's in the group anyway. So it was like family. It was like just getting everybody together. But what really drew me to it was that I have been wanting to help young Black people who are interested in the arts, and especially who are interested in technical theater. I've always wanted to work with them and to let them know, make them aware of the different jobs that are available in this industry, because I didn't know about this when I graduated college. I didn't realize, I wanted to be a sound engineer, but I didn't realize that I could make money in theater and actually make more money mixing sound for theater. And so I wanted to get involved with that. And the great thing is that we are broken up into committees, and I'm the co-chair of the mentorship committee. And that was right up my alley. And it's just like, this is what's going to put me on that path to try to help other young Black people, men, women. I would love to see more Black women come in here and do this, because I am the only Black woman on Broadway mixing Broadway shows. I'm the only one. Now, there are a couple who are backstage who are in what's called an A2 position, which means audio 2, which means you're the assistant to the head sound engineer, which is great. There are a couple, but male or female, there are just no other Black people mixing in the front of house position. And I really would like to see that change. There's only one other person that I know. He's the head sound engineer for the Hamilton tour, and he's a great engineer too. And I would love to get him to come back to New York, but he likes to be on the road. But yeah, so I would like to see things change as far as that goes. There are a lot of Black stagehands, most of whom are carpenters. There are some electricians. and a handful of sound people, but not on Broadway. Most of them work at like someplace like Jazz at Lincoln Center. Great technicians, but they're just not on Broadway. So that's one of the reasons why I got involved with Black Theater United.
So you mentioned committees. What other kinds of committees are on part of BTU?
We have a committee called the Artistic Review Performance Committee. And that committee basically deals with if people contact us and want a partnership in, say, a performance or a concert, but so more on the performance aspect of it. But we as Black Theater United also sat down and said, if we are going to be involved with anyone and partner, it has to be in the mission that we want to focus on. So we don't want to just do a show just to do a show. It's like, why are we doing it? What message are we putting out there, that people are going to learn from, So we have an Artistic Review Performance Committee who basically takes all those requests. We reach out to the people that have requested that. We find out why they want to do it. And we just basically look at it and see whether or not it's in line with what our mission is. And we did have, we also have another committee. This is our political committee, which is the committee that also people have called and reached out to partner when we were doing like the census, like Stacey Abrams. We partnered with Stacey Abrams, Fair Count initiative to do that. There was also the Broadway Green Alliance, who we partnered with, also about getting out the vote. They were very much involved on making people aware of what they call voting down the ballot, meaning half the time you go in and you see the president's name or who you want to vote, and you go, okay, and then you don't know anybody else that's down that line, and there were a lot of other people that we had to vote for. You were voting for representatives, you were voting for Senate, and as we've seen, I think this year has opened people's eyes to actually see how our government works and how much power the Senate has and how much power, the House of Representatives have. So you need to know those folks that you're putting in those seats. You know what I'm saying? So their initiative was a lot about voting down the ballot and teaching people why those positions. The judges that you have to vote for. Oh my God, the judges in itself makes all these decisions. Yeah. So we partnered with them. So that's our political committee. So we have the mentorship, the artistic, the political committee. Of course, we have our website committee that deals with the website. And we have a committee called the Summit Committee. And basically the Summit Committee is a committee that deals with, we have a lot of producers, people that own theaters, regional board members that have reached out. And that committee basically has conversations with all these different people that are coming to us and saying, we want to do something. We're going to be honest. We don't know how to do it and we don't know what to do. And we're like, okay. And we give them this is what we think you, and then we get in the room and we have discussions, which we've been having for like a couple of months. So that committee basically talks to those, and then we all as BTU will get in a room and have like 2 and 3 days where we call it a summit, where we're having serious conversations. We have a facilitator that's there with us to guide all of us through, because even though it's very truthful, because that's where you have to come, but it also comes from a place of love. It doesn't come in there where everybody's going to bash somebody, but we are going to be truthful, and we're going to say we're going to be truthful, and you have to be able to sit in that. But it is coming from a place because we want to lift everybody up. We want to see everybody for who they are, and we want to bless those differences and know the value of those differences. So we have a committee that basically pulls those folks and us together to have real conversations for change moving forward.
From an abolitionist point of perspective, that's that idea of revolutionary love, and the idea of being in community, and that community and revolutionary love is not mushy and coddling. It is about being truthful, authentic, in order for us to grow and make real impactful change, right? So I love hearing about the different committees. And so I'm thinking about, you said that this BTU sort of started around George Floyd, which was about 5 months ago-ish, 5 to 6 months ago. And you've already partnered with Stacey Abrams. You were focused on the census. You were focused on fair count and and voting and understanding how government works and what your voice is in terms of civic engagement and voting. That's a lot in a short amount of time, which is wonderful. What I'm curious about is what movement have you seen? So thinking about sort of concrete action. So when I, now that I have a better understanding of what you all are working on, I was thinking about, shifting discrimination or oppressive policies within the theater industry, but it feels like it's so much more, which is wonderful. And I love that because it is all interconnected, right? So I'm just curious, what actions have you seen or do you think need to be taken in order to make some systemic changes, whether it's in the theater industry or more widely?
Some of the things that we've seen so far are actually people are opening up their rooms to have this conversation, and are taking that hard stance of what are the next steps. And we are, when we have discussions, we are asking for concrete written down so you can be accountable for it. And people are diving into that. They really are. And, we're saying, that we're not saying that I think what happens a lot is people are in fear that they're going to lose something because we're asking them to open up the door. We're asking you to expand. We're not asking you to give up. What we are asking you to give up is the idea that you cannot grow if we're in the room. You have to say, what can I do? You can't start from, I can't. You have to start from, what can I do, right? And what I'm noticing is that people are leaning in. They're leaning in, and then sometimes they pull back a little bit, and they were like, no more, come on, fall back in. And then we got to come, because it's not going to be overnight. I mean, come on, it's not going to be overnight. And you know what? It's also never going to end with learning and doing this. It's not, it's going to be continuous. It's going to be continuous because we all grow. We have to continue to grow with each other, right? So I am seeing people, producers, general managers, artistic directors, executive directors, that are opening up and saying, wow, I did not know. I thought I was doing a good job. I really did. And apparently I did not see this. And I want to see what you're talking about, So those conversations are happening. And we just can't stop them. And they can't just be conversations. After conversation, there has to be action, right? So I do see those things happening. We also see the people that are going, no, and that are stepping away. And you know what? That's okay, right? If I'm going to invite you to the table and say, speak and have a conversation, but the people that have already been sitting at that table, see who am I inviting in the room and they don't want them and they want to get up and leave, you can get up and leave, right? But I am going to expand this room now. I think one of our founders the other day, that's also part of the mentorship, Carin, you'll know, she said, and she brought this up because we're around Thanksgiving, right? And everybody comes to whoever's house and they're sitting around the dining room table. And she said, we're asking you to add another leaf to that dining room table so more people can sit there with you. And when she said that, I was like, I'm going to write that down, So I think the fear has to go away and thinking that you're going to lose something. And when we're asking to open up that door and let somebody sit at that table, and then once they're at that table, then let them speak. And then you really listen. And then let's act on what they spoke about and what you heard.
That is to try to allay fears, but it's also to have people think about their mindset, because what we'd like to try to do is, and it's hard, you can't change people, but make people aware of their thought process and think, they may not think, and I hate to use the word racist, what some of them are, but it's just they have this feeling like it's a given that they really don't realize that they don't have to worry about trying to work extra hard to get to where they want to be. It's just they can some of them can fail upwards, and I've had a direct experience with that in the show. And I had actually a long conversation with another group called Just Labor that actually just came together. And it's all stagehands, mostly Local 1. And the discussion there is to try to change the thought process of a lot of the regular Local 1 stagehands that usually get all the jobs. They're usually the white males or their families. So that's a whole nother direction and idea to think about. But this past, I think whenever it was, Friday or Thursday actually, the discussion was about just like what people discuss at Thanksgiving and how some people and families deal with racism and how the comments that they can make when they're not around somebody of color. And I listened to all their discussions and, we talked for about an hour. And by the end of it, I said to everybody out, and there were about 20 people in the room, and I said, it was great to hear these conversations, but one thing that you all, and most of them are white, there are a couple of BIPOC, I'm the only black one that showed up. But I just said, I had to remind them, I said, you all, there are difficulties, and especially being women, you go through issues too, but you don't have to worry about how you look. And a lot of them just had this like light bulb moment. Even though they're discussing racial issues, they don't think about the fact that just being a person of color, being black, you just have to, people look at you and just automatically assume one thing. So it's about changing the mindset of people because it's very frustrating. And for me as a black woman, and sound engineer sitting in the front of house, when I mix a show, and I've done big Broadway shows. Okay, I've done Ragtime and Shuffle Along and Carousel. Those are big shows. But one thing I've experienced almost every time is when I'm in that position and the show's over and people are walking out, and they would have to walk past the mix position. And it's usually white men that say to me, as I'm standing there mixing, do you know what all this stuff does? And a couple of times I've looked at them, I'm like, no, I just watch the lights blink. That's all I do for 2.5 hours. The only show, and some of them think I'm the lighting person, so that people just have no idea about sound anyway. But the only show that I didn't have that problem on was The Color Purple, because black folks knew what I did and they all walked out and said how much they enjoyed the show and how good it sounded. That's the only show I had that on. So it's a thought process, bottom line.
I want to just go back to what is the thing that's going to change that perception, right? I mean, I had a question that's written here about our white presenting colleagues, specifically the colleagues, not necessarily audience members. And what specifically do you see them doing that in terms of, are they opening the table up there? Are they adding a leaf? Once the leaf is added, what comes of that? What has come from it? I would love a concrete, like this thing that was an issue. We're seeing this movement.
I am seeing some things happen, certainly with some sound designers that I work with. They go out of their way to try to bring in young people, especially during production for a new show. They'll bring in young people to sit in and learn, and they will go out of their way to teach them. And a show that I did out of town called Paradise Square, I did at Berkeley Rep in California. And the sound designer brought in this young black woman. She was so smart and so willing to learn. And he took her in and taught her everything. I was like, thank you. This is the kind of thing that we need to do. And this is the opportunity that I was given. Someone took me under it was a white man that took me under his wing and allowed me to learn from him. And because of him, I got my first show right out of college. And the person that gave me the job was Lily Tomlin. So that was my first gig. But the other thing, too, is that I made sure that I was ready for it. And that's one thing that we have to teach these young people, too, is that I want to bring you in and I want to really give you the opportunity, but know that you got to work for it, too.
Also in the same line of Carin, and I guess the reason I'm optimistic and I know it can be done is because I started off as a performer, right? Before I became a stage manager. I was a performer for 10 years, did national tours, did Broadway, was a dancer, singer. And then I transitioned into being a stage manager. And again, a white man mentored me in making this transition, right? Recommended me for my first Broadway gig, which happened to be my first stage manager gig, was a Broadway show. And once I got in there, believe it or not, the person that helped me grow up that ladder and gave me every first that I had was Hal Prince. Okay. He actually was the person the first Broadway stage manager show I got was recommended by a white man named Clayton Phillip. Right. And I got the job. Then it was Hal Prince's show. He saw how I worked. The next show I got again was with Clayton. And then it was another Hal Prince show. So he got to see more of me growing and growing and growing. And he knew that I started from not knowing anything. I had no schooling at all for stage management. It was hands-on training, right? Self-taught with this mentor that's teaching me. And then Hal Prince, after that second show, I did other shows with other people, but he was the one that called me to give me my first job as the production stage manager, heading a show, right? It wasn't on Broadway. I didn't need to be on Broadway right away being the head because I still had to learn. But when he called me and said, I have this job and I want you to do it as the head. And I was like, are you kidding me? I don't know if I'm ready. He goes, kid, you're ready. And I did it, right? Then went back and did some first assistants. He's the one that called me for my first Broadway PSM gig and said, you can do this. You are ready to do this. And I did it. And that's how I kept going. So it was done way back, in 1994. So that's why I know it can be done. It's just that you have to give those folks of us that might not have had as much training as other folks, but we have the passion to do this, right? And we need a chance and we need those mentors to help us. So that's why I'm out, because it happened for me and it can happen and those things are out there. And like Carin said, once you are given that opportunity though, you have to work for it, because I tell a lot of folks that I mentor now that just because I'm Black and you're Black, I'm not just going to hand you a show and you're going to walk in there and sit on your butt. You are going to do the job and you have to know that you need to do the job. Okay, there is work to do. And so that has happened. And one last thing I'm going to say about our colleagues is that I find that, and when I talk to my colleagues about privilege, I don't want you to think it's privilege is a bad thing. Hey, everybody wants to have privilege to be able to do stuff. It's what you do with that privilege, right? So I'm not asking you to throw that privilege out the door. I'm asking you to recognize that you have it. Now say, what can I do with this privilege that I have to uplift a marginalized or oppressed person? What can I do with this privilege that I just have? Recognize it and use it to help somebody else.
Well, yeah, I'm thinking about my own role and how I could be creating space, either mentoring or adding leaves to the tables. I love that metaphor. I love that. So let's
to give credit to Allison Tucker, since we're going to use it.
Right.
Allison Tucker.
Got it. I'm all about metaphors too, and I like giving credit to those who give it to us. So thank you for that. I'm going to ask the last question now, which is about, thank you, Alice Tucker. We've opened up many leaves, maybe to really expand, like you said, the table. And let's think about what ultimately, what is a liberated, like if we're going for liberation here, and in terms of anti-racism, a racially just world, what does that look like?
Well, to me, it's if we can get past certain, people's attitudes, if we can uplift people to positions of power, that's where it's going to have to start. Because if we can get Black people or people of color into positions of power, that will help to bring other people up behind them.
For me, I see a world that honors and celebrates our differences. Okay, we are different. And I actually embrace that. I am Black, you're white, you're Latinx. We are different, but those differences are amazing, right? And those differences will uplift us all. So I just want people to be able to don't look at something as different as negative. Differences to me are positive, and it is like just honor and celebrate those differences, because it just expands your mind. It just expands who we are as a world of, human beings, basically. So I want that to happen. And one other thing in that is that someone, and I don't know who to give credit to this, so but I've heard along the way, about how in theater we cast, in the sense of when you put out a casting notice and, you say, I want a Marilyn Monroe type, right? Who is comparable? Dorothy Dandridge, right? Let's think of who else might be, in that, look at, Meryl Streep. Wait a minute, Diane Carroll, so we can have somebody to identify with when we're walking in the room, instead of saying, I'm looking at it and it's for Black people, but you're still saying Marilyn Monroe type. I mean, what is that? You know what I'm saying? There's Ruby D, let's get those folks that literally we're standing on their shoulders, because they're the ones who opened up this way for us, So there was someone who said that they were talking and casting people are going, you know what? You're right. What are we doing? What have we been doing? So those things, those might think those are little, but those are huge. Those are some changes, because now I'm seeing me in that room. I'm seeing me. I'm not seeing who this is the type of person you want me to be. But I have somebody that happens to be Black that's there, and I have somebody be Latinx and, Asian, all of us. And so let's just open that up and see that spread along the way is what I like.
Thank you both so very much for spending this time with me and sharing us more about what Black Theater United is doing, more about the technical theater side of theater and casting. We got a little into casting. Ooh, we can talk a lot about that, right? But this is for me, because I'm mostly in theater education. This is the part of the theater component is not as strong in terms of my full-time life, but this is something that I'm incredibly passionate about, and I'm interested in doing more and more. So you're definitely inspiring me and putting a little spark under me. I appreciate that. Yes, that's it. Thanks so much for watching. I'm sorry. Thank you both for being here, is what I'm trying to say.
Thank you, Courtney.
Thank you for having us.
And thank you all for watching. That's where I was going. Teaching Artistry with Courtney J. Boddie. This conversation and more will be on the audio podcast. So subscribe to SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. And I'm really interested in this expanding the table idea and adding a leaf. Let's keep adding leaves, because we won't go back. We can't go back. Onwards.
Now is my time to shine. When your time comes, don't postpone it. When others doubt and out, you don't condone it. Truth be told, yourself is your toughest opponent. When your moment comes, grab hold and own it. Never let go, stand tall and hold tight. Overcoming obstacles is the objective in life. Doubters all the night, and unto them you shine bright. Cause inside your head, on goes the light. Ignite.